Welcome to Doctrine of the Hymns, where we explore the stories and doctrine behind the most beloved hymns of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Nick Wells, here with my co-host, Todd Jeppson. Let's enrich our worship, strengthen our faith, and dive into the music that brings us closer to God and Jesus Christ.
Well, Nick, as promised, we're going to be talking about the pirate song.
The pirate song. And still restoration theme. Loving it.
Of course.
Loving it.
The hymn is Who's on the Lord's Side Who? What a great hymn.
This song, when you sing it, it just feels like a sea shanty.
It does.
And we'll get into the background. And it makes a lot of sense why it feels like a sea shanty.
Yeah. And where it may not have actually been written or sung by pirates, the influence is very obvious in the meter, in how the song plays off itself, and the reasons as to why the hymn was written the way that it was.
But I've got to think somewhere at some point, I bet a pirate sang it on the sea. At least
definitely. You got to think that they did.
Somewhere it's got to have happened.
Yeah.
So let's dive into that background.
Yeah, absolutely. The tune of this song was originally written to another poem, a poem called A Life on the Ocean Wave. This song, written by Henry H. Russell, was eventually picked up and is now the iconic regimental march of His Majesty's Royal Marines in England.
If you just go type into Google, A Life on the Ocean Wave, the most frequently where you will see this music played is from His Majesty's Royal Marines. There's parades in England or things like that. That is where you will most likely see recordings of this. There's a couple of recordings I looked up with the lyrics actually included with like a folk singer singing, and he's singing A Life on the Ocean Wave. Those songs were really fun to listen to just hear what it could have been like when it was initially put together before it was really adopted as a very regimented march song used by Marines. And if you go and read the text of the poem as well, it is all, the title, A Life on the Ocean Wave, it is all about sailors preferring to be on the ocean, and that's where they want to be, and that is life. Yeah. And that is the best life you can have. And for that reason, that's why I feel like it's got to have been sung by sailors. It's got to have been sung by a pirate at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like Henry Russell was definitely iconic for his time, especially during a period when a lot of sacred music was very solemn. It was very slow. It was very quiet. He wrote music that uplifted the spirits, that had a good tune to it, music that people would remember. In fact, it's stated that he wrote songs most often about things like abolition, temperance, and even the reform of mental asylums. This is a very forward-thinking man of his day.
He strikes me as not an individual who sits back and coasts through things.
Yeah.
He more like lays back and enjoys the ride and jumps on whatever he thinks is fun, but not in a inappropriate or like harsh and derogatory to others kind of way.
Yeah.
But just full of life. He just seems like someone who's full of life. I found this line as I was researching him, that while playing organ music for a church, he discovered that sacred music played quickly makes the best kind of secular music. So it sounds like, he would just be the kind of guy that when it wasn't a church service time, he would just pull out the hymn book and then just play everything really fast. Just him by himself because he just thinks it's really fun. And then he would, he'd probably had poems that he knew, and he would just apply different songs to different poems. There's actually one instance of a really I can't remember the names of either of these, a poem or the song, but there was a hymn that's very slow, very calm, and he knew a poem that was really upbeat and fun, and he just sped up that hymn really fast and then put the poem lyrics to this hymn and published that song. Like that's just who he was. That's just the kind of stuff he did. And I also feel like who talks about, and maybe I'm just ignorant on this fact, but who talks about the reform of mental asylums? That sounds like such a very interesting thing to be included in a biography of you. You know, here we are 150 years later.
Yeah.
Somehow that still got contained. Like what was his passion to care about that? Now, I think it's a very noble thing. I think it's a fantastic thing to care about that. I know that mental asylums at the time were not the greatest places to be in any way.
Yeah. But if you think about the other things that he cared about, including abolition, it seemed like he dedicated his life to helping other people. He wanted everyone he came across to succeed, to come closer to Christ, to feel of that love, and to be free. How incredible, especially at that time where racism was at its peak. This was, I mean, we're talking about what? Late 17th century?
This is 1800s.
Yeah, that's insane to me. This hymn became so widely known, this tune became so popular, that it was eventually picked up by the author of the hymn that we know and love today, Hannah Last Cornaby.
Yeah. I have to make a comment, though, that I actually don't think Henry Russell, who wrote the music, did a lot in terms of bringing people to Christ. He was actually Jewish. So while he did play the organ for churches and things like that, and even his first wife, I believe, was Christian. Later in life, he was remarried, and his second wife was Jewish. He grew up Jewish. He raised all of his children Jewish. He was Jewish.
I still feel like the life that he led was representative of Christ.
I agree. As far as I could see in my studies, it felt he just seems like a really good man.
Yeah. And the fact that that light can be seen anywhere in the world, not just within the gospel of Jesus Christ, is wonderful and a testament that God truly does love all of his children.
Now going back, you mentioned Hannah Cornaby.
Yeah.
We actually want to do something a little bit different in this podcast. We normally spend the majority of the time talking about the text and the doctrine of the hymns, which is super important. In this particular instance, Hannah Cornaby, she kept a journal and published a journal. And because of that, we have quite a bit of good stories of her life. And her life is really representative of the text for this hymn. The text being, who's on the Lord's side? Who? She was an example of staying on the Lord's side. And we've got a wealth of good stories that we'd like to share. So we do still want to go through the hymn, and we'll do that first, actually. But we'll go through it quickly because we want to come back and get to her life more and the example that she was in being on the Lord's side.
So, Nick, let's go through this. The hymn, Who's on the Lord's Side? Who's on the Lord's side who? Now is the time to show. We ask it fearlessly. Who's on the Lord's side who? We wage no common war, cope with no common foe. The enemy's awake. Who's on the Lord's side who? We serve the living God and want his foes to know that if but few, we're great. Who's on the Lord's side who? We're going on to win. No fear must blanch the brow. The Lord of hosts is ours. Who's on the Lord's side who? The stone cut without hands to fill the earth must grow. Who will help to roll it on? Who's on the Lord's side who? Our ensign to the world is floating proudly now. No coward bears our flag. Who's on the Lord's side who? The powers of earth and hell in rage direct the blow that's aimed to crush the work. Who's on the Lord's side who? Truth, life, Liberty, freedom from death and woe are stakes we're fighting for. Who's on the Lord's side? Who? Such great lyrics.
Just as you were reading that, which we didn't go through the chorus. When you sing this, you'll go through the chorus each time.
Yeah.
Which I believe is just a repeat of the first bit of
Exactly,
the first verse.
which is why I omitted it.
Yeah.
Because it is just that first line. We ask it fearlessly, who's on the Lord's side?
And while you're reading that, I just quickly counted out how many times does it say the word who in just the verses. And a quick scan, I believe it was 18. I could have gotten it wrong. Could be plus or minus 2. But this song is really inviting who's going to make the stand? Who is going to do it? Regardless of anything, are you going to stand by Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
And I love that question because it's important that each of us ask it, and we ask it regularly. We need to know that we're on the Lord's side and that we're going to stand for him.
Yes. And I love that once again, we have a hymn of the restoration that provides that imagery of an ensign to the world.
Yeah.
If you've been following this podcast, you know during this season, we've already talked about this at least 3 times, if not more, that this is the Lord's church in his last days. That banner, he is there calling his children. And he asks, who is going to come and stand with him? In Alma chapter 5, verses 38 and 39, it states, Behold, I say unto you that the good shepherd doth call you. Yea, and in his own name he doth call you, which is the name of Christ. And whosoever will hearken unto the voice of the good shepherd, and doth deny him not, he will gather unto his fold.
The good shepherd doth call you. The scriptures in other places say, many are called, but few are chosen.
And why are they not chosen?
Because they didn't answer the who question correctly.
No.
They chose not to follow the Lord. We are called when we choose to follow.
And I think it's so important that in his own name he doth call you, which is the name of Christ. You have to put on his name.
Which is done through covenants.
Yes.
Which I love that we're tying in covenants now here.
And we're going to find out how important covenants were to Hannah. To her, in some cases, it was literally a matter of life or death. I'm so excited to talk about these stories because what better way to understand why she wrote this lyrics than by understanding who she was as a person. She truly was remarkable.
And to make sure I make this clear in this podcast, because I think this is important, I did not find out at what point in her life she wrote the lyrics for this hymn. So through all these stories, I do not know if any of them are directly correlated to the writing of the hymn, but certainly the experiences of her life, you can see how she wrote this hymn for sure. Now, several of these quotes she's recorded in her journal, and that's where I will get most of these quotations from. So Hannah was born in England and was married while over in England and joined the church with her husband in 1852. Eventually, later in life, they settled in Spanish Fork, Utah. So they emigrated to the United States and settled in Spanish Fork. But the story of her and her husband getting baptized is incredible. So a couple of excerpts now from her journal. She recorded about persecutions that she faced after joining the church. Our friends became enemies. We were persecuted and annoyed in many ways. Now, if we walked along the streets, we were met no kindly greeting, but were pointed out as saints and sometimes stoned. And then she says this about the actual day of her baptism. We found the house that they were staying in, surrounded by a mob, and through which we with difficulty made our way, amid oaths and threats of what would be done if any attempt were made to go into the water. We waited until near midnight, hoping the crowd would disperse, but it had all this time been increasing, until it numbered many hundreds, and we feared violence, not only to ourselves, but to the family under whose roof we were waiting. So here they were, waiting in a home to go out and get baptized in a river, and a crowd, a mob, is growing outside their house. So they're like, let's just wait this out. It's not waiting out. The mob's only growing in size.
And we're not talking about 7, 8, 9 people. We're not even talking about dozens. She said numbered many hundreds. That's a huge crowd.
It makes me wonder if they were known in the community for people to care. I didn't read that anywhere. But just how interesting in 1852 in England, people to be persecuting the saints so intensely.
Yeah. And this is only 20 something years after the church had started. So this is not very old at all.
She then records this about how they actually got to the water. So the man, this is not from the quotation, but the house that they were staying at, the man of that house found a way for them to sneak out a back door or something like that. And then Hannah writes this. They soon discovered their prey had escaped, and before we reached the water's edge, the whole horde was upon us, and my husband baptized me amid a shower of stones and shouts of duck him, and such cries. We then made our way back as best we could, followed by the mob, and although the stones whizzed around us thick as hail, not one touched us. We reached home in safety, thanking God for our miraculous deliverance. She was being baptized. In the act of being baptized, people were throwing stones at her. Stones were splashing in the water next to her while being baptized.
Yeah. That reminds me of this story of Christ when he reads the scripture that says, in this day, this has been fulfilled. And the mob rose against him, and it looked like they were going to take him, and somehow he escaped. He got out of their path miraculously. We could even think about Samuel the Lamanite. I mean, there's so many instances of God protecting his people. It's just incredible the faith that they would have had. I love it so much that she had the determination to do what she knew was right. Those covenants that we mentioned were so important to her that she didn't fear for her life because she knew what she had to do. Love that. The rest of Hannah's life is just as incredible. Seems like her faith never faltered, despite all the trials that she had, including one where she ended up falling ill for quite a long period of time. Nick, do you want to talk about that story?
Yeah. To really understand the story, I think it makes sense to share the punchline. She ended up being sick for 4 years. Unexplained. She never understood why she was sick. At the time she got sick, she had a very amazing experience. While in Spanish Fork, Hannah became very ill. It came on suddenly, and she did all she could to help her body heal. She prayed fervently to be healed, and one night she had a vision. A heavenly personage stood by me and asked, "Are you willing to suffer for your own good and for the glory of God?" I answered that I was. He then said, "Thou shalt come out of this sickness unscathed in body, sound in mind, and thy hair shall not be changed." I believed every word he had spoken, and during the years of sickness which followed, seldom lost hope of recovery, although, through the weakness of the body, sometimes I feared I should not hold out. There's more to this story, but I don't think we need to go into it here. We can just cap on the highlights. Right when she got sick, she had this vision. She knew that God was aware of her being sick, and she was promised that everything would be okay. Through her sickness, At some time through an apostle and her bishop stopped by her house and gave her a blessing and promised that she would be healed. A time later, her block teacher, which was the forerunner of home teaching, which is the forerunner of ministering, came by her house and offered a blessing as well and blessed her that she would be healed. And it wasn't immediately in either of those instances, but eventually at the end of this 4 years, she felt good one day and she stood up and started walking around again, and she was okay and she was healed. And it was never understood why she was sick for 4 years. She does say in her journal, sometimes I feared I should not hold out, but she did keep her faith. I just find that to be the most incredible story. To be sick for so long, to even be told before you got, right when you got sick, that this was going to be a difficult trial, but that you're going to be okay. And she was. She was okay at the end of it.
And the best part of this story is that it has a happy ending. Because of Hannah's faith and her husband's faith, because they held out true to the end, an incredible miracle once again happened. They were blessed with the opportunity to make even more covenants with the Lord. The story continues on the 21st of March of 1856. We passed through the endowment house. Now, the endowment house, for those of you who may not be familiar, it was located on Temple Square, and it served as a temporary temple during the construction of the Salt Lake Temple. So while the Salt Lake Temple was being built, for about 30 years, the endowment house stood where people could go and get their endowments. Those who have enjoyed the privilege can appreciate the blessing it was to us at the time, she stated. Having left all for the gospel's sake, we were repaid 100-fold. Think about everything that they gave up. Probably a very comfortable home in England. Like you said, Nick, they were probably fairly well known. If there was such,
how intense the mobs were.
Exactly.
So we don't know.
But going off of that, she recollects how happy they felt the next morning as they joined a company going to dig roots. The warm rays of the spring sun seemed to diffuse gladness all around. Everybody seemed cheerful. I was free from care as the birds, and like them, wanted to praise the Creator for all of his goodness.
That line, we were repaid 100-fold. When I think of this hymn, who's on the Lord's side who? Being paid 100-fold is the result of being on the Lord's side. The world can be tempting. The world can be attractive. But when we let off the natural man and become a saint through Christ, we receive 100-fold of what is really, really good, of what we really actually want. And that's the blessings that we're searching for. Those are the blessings that we want, not what the world provides us.
Yeah.
And we will have to pass through trial. Now, I don't know when this 4 years of sickness happened in her life. I assume it was actually later in life and even after this endowment house experience that she had. But certainly she had her eyes focused on the Savior and on returning to God and being faithful. And that brings the greatest blessings, according to her.
How wonderful. And what a great example for us nowadays. People may not be throwing rocks. In some cases, maybe they do. A lot of times it's easier to look at the world and say, I want that. That's what I want. I want what these people have. And yet, when we stay true to our covenants, the blessings that we receive always outweigh anything the world can give us. No riches, no position of power, no fame can ever take away or belittle the power of God. It's really why this hymn was written the way that it was, why the tune is so upbeat and hopeful, why the lyrics talk about why we should be on the Lord's side.
I like the line right at the end. Who's on the Lord's side? Who? Truth, life, and liberty, freedom from death and woe, are stakes we're fighting for. So we wage no common war, cope with no common foe. Satan is real, and Satan is against the work that is happening and the work that we are a part of. But what we're fighting for is worth it.
Yeah.
And the results that come are worth it. And I testify of that. I have felt of God's love. It is worth going for.
And I can add my testimony to that. And even better, I can add the testimony of the scriptures in Mosiah chapter 2, verse 31, that says, For behold, I say unto you that if ye do this, ye shall always rejoice and be filled with the love of God. It's when we choose to keep those covenants that we are filled with that love, with that joy, with that peace that Hannah talked about, where in the end, we want to be just as the birds and sing praises to our Creator.
What an incredible life of Hannah's. What an incredible hymn to be produced from it, and that we have the opportunity to sing it.
How great.
I'm excited to sing this more and think about these things that we've learned. That'll change the way I sing this hymn.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll even close my eyes and put myself on a boat while I sing it.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us on this journey today. We have loved talking about the restoration, and we're not done yet.
Definitely not. Next week, we're going to go over the hymn, Saints Behold How Great Jehovah, hymn number 28 in the hymnal.
Be excited, people. It's going to be good.
Thank you very much. We look forward to next week.
Have a good one. Bye.